If Sylvia will take a roll, but also too, could I have a motion to accept the minutes of April 26th? I'm just taking things out of order on the agenda. A motion and a second, and Sylvia, do you want to do the roll call and the approval of minutes?
I will. All right.
Mr. Chair, I do a correction to the minutes.
Yes, you can.
Mr. Winovich is listed as an absent member. He's also mentioned as having abstained from the minutes. But one of those is not true.
I will check the records.
We will make that correction.
So if that's in the approval of minutes.
Rudy Gesundheit, maybe you may want to
Excuse me.
you may want to mute yourself.
I did. I thought I had it muted. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. All right. Are we ready for roll call then?
Yes, we are.
Here we go. From Auburn, Paula Martzloff. Bedford, Bill DeShaco. On virtually for Bedford, Barbara Salvatore.
Yes, and approved.
Thank you, Barbara. Danielle Ivanzik.
Yes.
Did I say that right, Danielle?
Evanzik.
Ivanzik. Party. Okay, Ivanzik. From Candio in the room, Al Hall. Thanks, Al. And virtually, we have Rudy Cartier.
Obviously, yes, and yes.
Thanks, Rudy. Chester, we have Deb Munson virtually.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Deb. We don't have anyone from Deerfield unless I missed it. From Derry, we have John O'Connor virtually.
Here and yes.
Thanks, John. And Richard Tripp.
Here and abstain.
Thank you, Richard. We also have George Sioris from Derry. And
Hi, Sylvia. Hello.
not a vote, George, just recognizing you.
Thank you.
Francistown, we have Linda Kuhnhart in the house.
Yes.
Thank you, Linda. From Goffstown, David Pierce is here today.
Yes, in the room and yes on the.
Thank you. Sorry, Linda is correcting me. Alfred Eisenberg, I knew I didn't get one person, is virtual.
Yes, yes, and approve.
Did I miss Jennifer or is she? No. Okay, great. Goffstown, we already talked about David and Jacob LaFontaine, virtual.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Jacob. Let's see, we are so excited to welcome one of our newest commissioners from Hooksett, Rob Curry. Hey, Rob. I'm so glad to have Rob in the room. Let's see, and Londonderry, we have everyone except for Martin Srugas, who's in the room. Hi, Martin. Thank you, Martin. And everyone else is virtual. Suzanne Brunel,
Yes, and approve.
Deborah Levens,
Present, abstain.
Arthur Rugg,
I am here and yes on the minutes.
and Lynn Wiles.
And I am here and I abstain on the minutes from last month.
Thank you. From Manchester in the room, Ray Clement
Here and yes.
and Marcus Ponce de Leon.
Here abstain.
Thanks, Marcus. New Boston, right behind me, is Mark Sunan.
Here and abstain.
From Ware, virtually, we have Tom Clow.
Here and yes.
From Wyndham, Peter Griffin in the room.
Present and yes on the minutes.
And let's see, did I miss any of the community members?
Sylvia, this is Brian Battaglia. I joined late.
Thank you, Brian. Sneak you. All right. Thanks for coming in and being here. Let's see, from DOT, we have William Rose. William?
Sorry about that. Slow on the mute button. Present and yes.
All right. And Bill Watson.
Good morning.
All right. And let's see, a non-voting member, but here just want to acknowledge Tim White from DES.
Good morning.
and Craig Tufts from Central Regional Planning Commission.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Craig. All right, I think that's all the commissioners. Am I correct?
Okay, I think you are correct.
Thank you.
I would like to take this moment on two things. First of all, to thank Barbara Salvatore. This being her last meeting for her long service on as a commissioner from Bedford on the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. Barbara, it's been a pleasure working with you, and thank you so much for your contributions to the organization.
There she is. Although Barbara, are you coming to the June meeting? You're muted, Barbara.
Barbara, I think you're muted.
Yes, I will be coming to the June meeting.
All right, so we'll get to see you one more time. But we did want to acknowledge, thanks, Peter.
Oh, you're welcome. The next item on the agenda is a remembrance of Bill Herman. As you may know, Bill passed away quite recently. He was a 30-year member of as a commissioner and devoted to this organization, so much so that he actually participated in meetings from his, and I stress the word, hospice bed several times towards the end of his life. So let's take a moment and remember Bill Herman. Thank you.
If I might, Peter.
Please go right ahead.
I'm sharing on the screen, and hopefully everyone can see this. These are Bill's own words from a last email he sent me.
You need to unlock your iPhone first.
Say it again. Did you hear that? I heard something. Anyway,
Could you repeat yourself, please?
can the virtual audience see this document for Bill?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is from an email, and we just had thanked him for all his participation, and this is what he sent back. I can very honestly say my time with SNHPC has been enjoyable in terms of getting to know many of our regional neighbors in positive ways that could benefit our individual communities. Over time, I considered many to be friends and not just monthly meeting mates. Whether larger or small, all have been treated equally and with respect. Many of the early chairs of the commission were insistent of that approach and that we leave our local biases at the door. We are all one in our efforts, and what could be good for one area is good for the whole. I certainly hope I maintained that attitude and approach not only during my time as chair, but throughout my complete tenure with the SNHPC. Recently, the executive committee agreed that we will rename this room the William Herman Conference Room. And so I just wanted to share that with everyone.
Thank you, Sylvia. Do we have any old business to come before this meeting? No? Okay. Moving right along to new business. The Transportation Improvement Program Amendment number 4, presented by Nate Miller.
Well, good morning, everyone. Sylvia, can you make me the co-host by chance if you haven't already?
I have already.
Okay. We're starting with tip amendment number 4. Is that right, Peter, on the agenda?
That is correct.
Okay. Can everybody see this in full screen mode?
Yes.
We cannot.
You cannot.
We're looking at your multi-slide.
Oh, all right. I only have one. All right, let's see. How about this?
Yes.
Perfect.
All right.
Oh, yeah, that's better. Yep.
Perfect. I don't know why it sometimes defaults to that presenter screen, but okay. A quick overview here of tip amendment number 4. This is kind of a sneak preview. Everybody here knows, we work with our colleagues at New Hampshire DOT to review and process periodic amendments. They tend to happen roughly quarterly, periodic amendments to our transportation improvement program to encompass a variety of different project changes. You're going to get a sneak preview of TIP Amendment number 4 today because TIP Amendment 4 hasn't been released yet. We plan to release it on Monday, June 6th for a 10-day public comment period, and we will have a public hearing at our June 28th MPO meeting. But today we'll walk through the project changes that you can expect to see in TIP Amendment number 4. So diving right in, there are a series of project changes that are just like this. This is a bridge rehabilitation project. It's a local bridge in the town of Auburn. It's Griffin Mill Road over Maple Falls Brook. There are a number of local bridge projects that are included in TIP Amendment number 4. And the reason they're included in the TIP Amendment is that there is a new source of federal funding that is coming through the IIJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It goes by 2 names now, but it's a new source of bridge funding, and DOT is using that federal bridge funding that's coming in. It's called the Mobile Program, and they're offsetting some of the state aid bridge funding. So they're using federal funding to kind of supplement some of the existing state aid bridge funding that had previously been programmed to fund these different projects, and by doing that, they can fund more local bridge projects around the state. So there's no change to this project in Auburn, other than the fact that the federal funding type for the construction phase is being changed to that mobile federal funding through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So no change in timeline or project cost or anything like that, just funding source. Same exact thing here in Bedford for the bridge replacement on Beals Road over Babusick Brook. This is the same thing. It's another local bridge where some construction phase funding is changing the funding type from state aid bridge to that mobile federal funding source. Londonderry is, of course, the I-93 Exit 4A project, and we're going to see one change here in the overarching project, which is number 13065, and that project, the change that will be in Amendment 4 is to remove construction phase funding from this 13065 project. The removal of construction funding doesn't mean that construction is not going to happen on the project. It's just that construction funding for the project is now being split into a series of what we call child projects, but essentially they're sub-projects. And the largest of those is the A project, number 13065A, but there are also D and E projects. So it's just kind of shifting where the construction funding lives for this project from an administrative perspective, not changing anything about the scope of work or timeline for the project. One of those child projects is new and will be included in Amendment number 4, and that is project 13065E. So this will be a new project addition in TIP Amendment number 4. And this project is specific to building demolitions on Folsom Road. So this 13065E project is new, but it's one of these series of child projects or sub projects where the construction funding for this Exit 4A project is going to be programmed. So this particular project, which will appear in Amendment 4, is just specific to building demolitions on Folsom Road. In Manchester, the CMAC project to implement adaptive signal control on Granite Street and upgrade signal performance on South Willow Street, that the construction phase funding for that project is advancing from fiscal 24 to fiscal 22. That's based on the readiness of the project and that it's ready to begin going towards the construction phase. And so that construction funding is being moved up accordingly because the city is ready to go. A new project will appear in TIP Amendment number 4. It is a project in Manchester. It's simply described as Eddy Road / Exit 6 southbound on-ramp intersection safety improvements. This was a project that was added at the end of the last 10-year plan cycle through the Executive Council process directly. We don't know a lot about the specific scope of this project, and we're going to learn more about what exactly is encompassed in this project as it goes through kind of the beginning of the preliminary engineering phase. But this project will appear in TIP Amendment number 4 for the first time, or it will appear in the TIP for the first time in TIP Amendment number 4. New Boston, the bridge replacement on Tucker Mill Road over the middle branch of the Piscataquag River. This is another of the local bridges that are seeing state aid bridge funding being offset by that federal mobile funding in the construction phase. So again, nothing changing here about the cost or timeline of the project, just the funding source for the construction phase work. A few statewide program changes. The first is what's called the CRDR program, which is a culvert replacement and rehabilitation program. This is seeing increasing construction phase funding in fiscal year 23 and 24. That additional funding is necessary to complete the projects program statewide. Under this program, in our region, this program includes the rehabilitation of a 72-inch pipe carrying Bowman Brook under Route 114 in the town of Bedford, along with many other projects around the state that are funded in this CRDR program. The mobile program, I've talked about that a couple of times now. This is the new municipal off-system bridge rehabilitation and replacement program that is being funded through that specific bridge funding in the IIJA, the bipartisan infrastructure law. That TIP Amendment 4 is just establishing a new kind of umbrella statewide program for that funding. Not to be confused with the other municipal off-system bridge rehabilitation and replacement program, which has long been called MOBRR, M-O-B-R-R. That is a separate municipal off-system bridge rehabilitation program that is funded by federal funds. That's funded through Surface Transportation Block Grant federal funding rather than the specific bridge program funding in the IIJA. I know that's a little bit confusing, but that's the distinction there. And the MOBRR program is also going to see increased construction phase funding in fiscal 23 and 24 based on the needs, the statewide projects that are being funded under that MOBRR program. And in our region, the MOBRR program includes the Amoskeag bridges in Manchester, as well as the Elm Street Bridge over the B&M Railroad in Manchester. Another program change, statewide program. This is what we call TSMO, which is the statewide traffic transportation systems management operations, TSMO, TSMO, along with ITS technologies and traveler information. This program will see increased funding in fiscal years 22 through 24. And the reason for that increased funding is that again, some of the statewide projects in the program require that additional funding. The biggest project in the program is the procurement of the new, I think it's New England Compass Advanced Transportation Management System, what they call an ATMS. That is the underlying software framework that funds or that supports the 211 system. If you're familiar with the traveler information system known as 211 in New Hampshire, that system is funded under this TSMO program. And that's a collaborative effort with our colleagues in Maine and Vermont. So it's a joint effort between the three states, and so Maine and Vermont non-participating funding will be included as well in this project when you see it in TIP Amendment number 4. Another statewide program, which is the USSS program, the update of signage on the state transportation system. This will see increased program funding this fiscal year and fiscal year 22. And the reason for that is additional funding, again, is needed to complete the statewide projects in the program. Most notably in that program is the replacement and upgrade of enhanced reference location signs around the state. So these are the mile markers that you see on the limited access system and the interstate system. Not to be confused with the renumbering of the exits or anything like that. That's a completely different thing. This project is simply about updating signage on the state system, and in this case, the most significant component of that is mile markers. A removal of a project. This is the Salem to Manchester final design project. There was a little bit of residual funding that had been programmed in this in our current tip related to the completion of the Salem to Manchester project. Obviously, that project is now complete and finished, and this project is closed out, and therefore we're removing it from the tip. A couple of statewide projects that I'd like to note. The first is a project to construct a series of WIM stations, what we call WIM stations, Way in Motion, WIM, or WIM stations for traffic data collection. This would be a new project in the tip, and the reason for this is there are federal requirements that stipulate that states must continuously collect certain types of traffic data, including vehicle weights. Way in motion scales capture those axle weights and gross vehicle weights as vehicles drive over them at highway speeds. And so you'll see, if you've ever gone over something that looks like a big metal plate in the interstate system, either in New Hampshire or elsewhere, that is typically a way in motion scale. And in the SNHPC region, this statewide project will include the construction of a WIM station on I-93 northbound between exits 8 and 9 in Manchester. But bigger picture, this project as a whole will help New Hampshire to meet its federal requirements for traffic data, including vehicle weights. Very similarly, a companion project to construct a series of vehicle classification stations to support the statewide traffic data collection program. This is also a new project in our tip. And again, that is because federal requirements stipulate that states must also continuously collect traffic data, which includes vehicle classification on certain types of roadways. So this is an overarching project statewide that would see the construction of classification stations at many different locations around the state. DOT, and one of those stations identified by DOT would be a classification station on New Boston Road in the town of Bedford. Lastly, last project highlight here for tip amendment number 4 is the Route 101 project, a new Route 101 project that's in the Wilton, Milford, Amherst, Bedford. That's the former area of the 2002 corridor study of Route 101. This would be a new project in the tip, and it is for continued implementation of the improvements identified in the Route 101 corridor study from back in 2002. We don't know specifically what location this will be at this point. The Department of Transportation is refining a prioritization study of locations throughout the corridor to determine what specific improvements will be implemented through this project. And we expect that decision to come pretty soon, likely by the end of May. We'll have a better idea of what specific location or locations will be funded through this particular 13692E project. So that's it. I know that's sort of a quick overview of the different projects that you can expect to see in tip amendment number 4. Again, we will be releasing tip amendment number 4 on June 6th. You will all have it included in your packets for the June MPO meeting. But this being kind of a sneak preview of the projects you can expect to see in tip amendment number 4, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the amendment if there are any.
Okay, go ahead.
Any questions from in-house, Mark?
So Nick, there's a couple of them that I noted are moving funding into FY22. If the vote on the tip amendment doesn't even occur until a week before the end of fiscal year 22, why?
Because we're talking about federal fiscal year when it relates to tip.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any additional in-house questions? Any from remote? Any questions from remote participants? Okay, thank you, Nate. You're still on deck here.
I'm still on deck. Okay, on to the 10-year plan.
Yes, So Nate, just one question. I'm looking at that really nice landscape behind you. Is that hiding your pool with your drink that has a little umbrella on it?
No, just hiding whatever bookshelves are behind me here in our home office. Nothing that nice.
Okay, Nate, continue with the 10-year plan.
All right, I'm going to try to find my 10-year plan. Bear with me one second. Can everybody see this in full screen mode?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. On to the next topic, which is the pending start of the next 10-year transportation improvement plan update. So this will be just kind of a brief overview of where we're headed with the next 10-year plan update. As a reminder for everybody, we work collaboratively with our colleagues at New Hampshire DOT as well as the other regional planning commissions around the state to develop the 10-year transportation improvement plan. It is updated. This plan is updated biennially. And the next update of the plan will cover the period from fiscal year 2025 to 2034. So it's hard to imagine that we're thinking that far into the future in terms of the 10-year plan, but yes, the next update will cover 2025 to 2034. I showed this slide probably in every 10-year plan presentation that I give, just so you all understand how things work in terms of our planning and project development process. We go from the long range plan, which is a federal requirement that looks out a minimum of 20 years, to a 10-year plan, which is a state requirement looking out 10 years into the future. And then the first 4 years of the 10-year plan constitute our federally required transportation improvement program, which is what we just talked about, TIP amendment number 4. That is part of our TIP. And typically when we're talking about our TIP, we're talking about 4 years, which are generally the first 4 years of the 10-year plan. When a project goes into the 10-year plan, it is considered quote unquote funded for our purposes in New Hampshire. And so that's kind of the distinction. The long range transportation plan is not funded. It must be fiscally constrained, but there's not actual funding programmed for a project yet. If it's in the long range plan, projects that go into the 10-year plan are considered to have a funding commitment associated with them. So we do this a little bit differently in New Hampshire in terms of having this mid-range plan or 10-year plan, but it works pretty well in our state. And so that's what we're focused on, is updating the 10-year plan. In past 10-year plan update cycles, prior to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, New Hampshire DOT has allocated a total of $50 million statewide for regional projects. So our share of that, based on our proportion in the region of the overall statewide federal aid eligible lane miles and population, has been historically $8.55 million of that $50 million allocation. And for those of you who have remember previous 10-year plan cycles, that's what our funding constraint has been, $8.55 million. However, we have seen a significant increase in formula funding under Title 23 coming into New Hampshire under the IIJA, substantial increases. Fiscal year 21, prior to the IIJA, total Federal Highway Administration apportionments to New Hampshire were just under $181 million. And so here in fiscal year 22, the first year of the IIJA, total federal highway apportionments are expected to be just under $219 million. So about a 21% increase in Title 23 apportionments coming to New Hampshire under the IIJA. We continue to have discussions between the DOT and the regional planning commissions about exactly what the statewide allocation of funding will be to support regional projects in this next 10-year plan update. I will say that we do support an increase in the regional 10-year plan funding allocation proportional to the increase in federal formula funding that the state as a whole is receiving under the IIJA. And that would constitute essentially about a 20% increase. That's what we support. And all 4 MPOs have sent joint correspondence to New Hampshire DOT in support of that. So under that scenario, the funding allocation statewide would increase from $50 to $60 million, and the SNHPC's regional allocation would also increase proportionately to approximately $10.56 million based on the most current population figures. So we don't know exactly what the allocation will be yet, but we are advocating for that proportional increase relative to what the state as a whole is receiving through the IIJA. So we're cautiously optimistic that there will be an increase in our regional allocation because of that. In terms of how we evaluate projects, just as a reminder, all 9 regional planning commissions utilize the same set of 15 criteria to evaluate and prioritize projects for the 10-year plan. The difference is that those criteria are weighted individually by each region to reflect the unique needs and priorities of that region. So we last did this here at the SNHPC in July of 2020, and we're going to do so again next month. That will be one of the items on your agenda next month, will be to review and make any changes you see fit to the criteria weightings. And just as a reminder, this is a big lot of text here that I'm not going to go all the way through, but this will be the starting point for that discussion, as well as whatever our TAC may recommend to you on an advisory basis for weighting changes. We have local and regional economic development, freight movement, equity and environmental justice, accessibility, mobility need and performance, mobility intervention, hazard risk, hazard mitigation, traffic volume, facility importance, safety performance, safety measures, state of repair, maintenance, and support. Those are all the criteria. We do have a handout that will be along with your packet that goes into more detail about the definition of each of these criteria and how these criteria are evaluated. That will be part of your packet for the next meeting, just as background information. But yes, we will update the regional weightings, which you see on the right column were the regional weightings from the last 10-year plan cycle 2 years ago. So we will update those weightings, and that will be as I mentioned, on the June agenda. So stay tuned for more discussion about that in June. DOT, as they have for the past couple of cycles, does require engineering review of all projects that are to be included in the 10-year plan for scoping and cost estimation purposes. We currently, our on-call engineer is VHB. Our existing contract with VHB for on-call engineering is expiring at the end of this fiscal year, June 30th. And so we have actually released a new RFQ for on-call engineering that will carry us through June 2024. So if you're interested in reading that RFQ, you can find it right on the front page of the SNHPC website. We put that out on the street last week, and we sent direct invitations to 8 different firms around the region and have posted it fairly broadly on the web as well and through other venues. So hopefully we get good response to that RFQ, and we're able to have a on-call engineer secured and in place through June of 2024 that will help us with evaluating the projects that come in through this 10-year plan update cycle. Our schedule for this, based on some guidance that was recently released by New Hampshire DOT, we are anticipating sending out project solicitation correspondence for the 10-year plan to all of our communities next week, the week of May 30th. Communities will have essentially 2 months to evaluate what their project needs are and submit project submissions to us. So that's 2 full meeting cycles typically in each municipality. Typically a meeting cycle happens monthly, if not shorter than monthly. This gives 2 full meeting cycles, 2 months for communities to consider what their project needs are and submit project needs to us. From August to October, we will work with our on-call engineering consultant to evaluate those candidate projects and do a project cost estimation and scoping for those projects. And November 11th, what I'm calling a short list of candidate projects is due to New Hampshire DOT. So November 11th is 6 months from now, essentially the time where we need to provide a DOT with a short list of projects that we're going to be focusing on as our initial priorities in this 10-year plan update cycle. And those will have already been reviewed by our on-call engineer. DOT will review the projects as well as the engineering scoping reports between December and February of 2023, December of 2022 to February of 2023. And they will provide comments as well from their review. They have an internal 10-year plan committee that's comprised of many different disciplines within DOT that reviews candidate projects. We will receive comments from that group on our candidate projects. And then ultimately our final deadline is March 31st of 2023 to submit our final regional priorities to DOT. So again, 10-year plan process just kicking off at this point. You will be hearing much more about the 10-year plan in the coming meetings over the coming months. But for now, just be aware that 10-year plan project solicitation correspondence will be heading to all of your communities starting next week. And all of our staff are here to provide any community with technical assistance as may be needed to help scope a project application or compile the supporting documentation necessary for a 10-year plan project application. So much more to come in the coming days and weeks, but that is kind of a general overview of where we think we're headed with the 10-year plan process and what our general timeline is going to be.
Questions for Nate in-house? Not seeing anyone wish to question. Anyone remotely would like to question Nate on the projects? Okay, Nate, thanks so much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Other business. Sylvia, do we have other business?
No, I think we're square away there.
Okay.
Wait, we have James raising a hand.
I just want to make a quick comment that Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission was the recipient of a $500,000 grant from the Environmental Protection Agency for brownfields assessments. Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission submitted this grant application the last 3 years in a row with changes to the narratives based on input from EPA, and was successfully awarded during this third application. The application is focused on addressing areas with known environmental justice concentrations. And so there's 3 priority sites, 2 in sort of center of Manchester and 1 on the border between Londonderry and Derry, which is a manufactured home facility that's very close to a Superfund site. And so we'll be putting together an action committee or sort of advisory committee for brownfields in the next couple months. We'll have some kind of press release with EPA, potentially some elected officials, and we'll get to work identifying and inventorying brownfield sites as potential candidates for assessment. And we will implement that grant over the next couple of years.
Congratulations. You guys were on a roll with getting grants. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn the MPO? Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye.
Yes.
Thumbs up around the globe here, virtual.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Yeah, I looked at that and that was a request. Hard to hear folks in the back. Yeah, if people could just speak up.
Okay. I'd like to call to order the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission meeting. Sylvia, could you do a roll call, but also could I have an approval for the minutes of April 26th? Is there a second? Any corrections or omissions? Yes,
Very
Mark.
similar. Mr. Winovich is shown as absent and making abstaining.
Okay. Could I have an approval for minutes as amended? And Sylvia, want to do roll call?
Roll call. Auburn, we have Paula Martzloff.
Yes.
Thank you. Bedford, Bill DeShaco.
Here. Yes.
Virtually from Bedford, Barbara Salvatore.
Yes, and I'm the one that is saying, Peter, I can barely hear a word you are saying, and I had no idea what we received a grant for. Sorry.
Okay, we do have another business at the end of this part of the meeting, and I will have James go over it again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for bringing that up. So I want to make sure everyone can hear all the proceedings. Continue, Sylvia.
Danielle Evans, I think I did it right. Evanzik.
Yep, you did it right. Yes.
I just a little practice. Candia, we have Al Hall and Rudy Cartier.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Rudy. Chester, we have Deb Munson. Deb,
Sorry. Here and yes.
thanks, Deb. Let's see, Derry, John O'Connor,
Here and yes.
Richard Tripp.
Here and abstain.
From Francistown, we have Linda Kuhnhart.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Linda, and Alfred Eisenberg.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Alfred. Goffstown, David Pierce
Here, yes, on the motion.
and Jacob LaFontaine.
Here and yes.
From Hooksett, Rob Curry.
Here and abstain.
Thanks, Rob. Londonderry in-house, we have Martin Srugas.
Here and yes.
Virtually Brian Battaglia,
Here and yes.
Suzanne Brunel,
Here and yes.
Deb Levens,
Here and abstain.
Arthur Rugg,
I am here and yes on the minutes.
and Lynn Wiles.
Yes, I'm here and I abstain on the minutes.
Thank you. Manchester, we have Ray Clement,
Here and yes.
Marcus Ponce de Leon,
Here and yes.
and Don Waldron. is
Here
virtual.
and abstain.
Thanks, Don. I did notice. New Boston, Mark Sunan,
Here and abstain.
in Ware, Tom Clow,
Here, yes.
and Wyndham, Peter Griffin.
Here and yes.
All right.
Okay, Sylvia, you're on. Do you want to discuss the New Hampshire drinking water? And there is an attachment.
I do. I'm finding our, let's see. Thank you. It takes a whole room, doesn't it? Okay, there we go. So everyone may recall from the town of Londonderry, we have had a couple of times a visitor. Ray, was it Ray? What's his name again? Nate, you remember his name.
Ray Breslin.
Thank you. And he, one of his biggest concerns is drinking water. So I made it a priority to contact experts from DES and found Amy Russo and Aaron Holmes to come talk to us about water quality and what's the latest happening at DES. And I have made you co-hosts so you can do your own PowerPoint work. So feel free to take it away. And we can see it completely. But we're not hearing anything yet. So you may have muted yourselves.
Oh yeah, no, I was muting just as I was kind of working through, making sure I have the right screens up and making sure that everybody can see the presentation. So, well, good afternoon. My name is Erin Holmes and I'm the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund Administrator at DES. And I'll be speaking first, and then Amy Russo, who is the DES PFAS coordinator, will be giving you some more kind of on the ground specific information regarding PFAS. And what I'm really going to focus on today is talking about some of the solutions that we are working on at DES, just to give you a holistic overview of all the work that we're doing at the agency. But I'm going to put the very bold caveat that there is no way we can touch upon all the details in a 20 to 45 minute presentation. It's multifaceted. It involves every division, air, water, waste at the agency. There's lots of bureaus doing different programs, implementing different solutions throughout the agency. So, we're very familiar with Mr. Breslin as a trust fund administrator. He attends a lot of our meetings and is very in tune and in touch with what's going on, especially in Londonderry. So what I'm going to try to just give you is the takeaway that there's a lot being done. Certainly we're available for more information and answer any questions that you might have that Amy and I could respond to today. And so I just always like to share a picture of myself and my daughter. She's 6.5. We live in Concord, and really a lot of what I do is thinking about not just today and the issues that we face as a state and as an agency, but what is needed for tomorrow, and to make sure that we're putting the right policies and the right projects in place and moving things forward, looking towards the future, because certainly as issues come up, they're just going to get harder to address if we're not thinking about what may be coming down the line. Just like having a 6-year-old. I have no idea what the future is going to bring, but I like to hope that I'm prepared for it. So the overview of challenges of water in New Hampshire. And so whenever we talk about this, we talk about turning on the tap, and there's nothing more important than having clean, safe drinking water coming out of that tap. But turning on the tap, whether it's from your private well or from a public water system, there is so much going into protecting that drop of water. And that's sort of what my word drop is trying to show is you have to be thinking about conservation. You have to be managing watershed activities. What's happening around the water sources? How are we managing development around those water sources? What's happening with our municipal and industrial treatment facilities? What's going into the water? What's going into the watershed? How do we deal with resiliency and long-term stormwater control and flood risk issues? And so there's a balance of all of these things that go into clean water. And many of these systems and issues require funding to address and to make sure we're resilient for the future. Just all of that need happening, then enter in PFAS, a contaminant that really is, everybody I think in the state knows about it at this point. And over the last 5 years, it's really shaped a lot of the projects that we've moved forward as well, and the programs. And Amy will give you a really great deep dive into what the agency is doing to specifically address PFAS. But on top of just general management and maintenance of the assets that we have, you add in contamination and it quickly becomes a much bigger problem on top of all the other issues we face for that long-term longevity of the drinking water supplies. And so we need to understand how to quantify those issues, how to address those issues, and then how to fund those issues. And that's what I'm going to focus on throughout this presentation is really, what we're doing in that aspect. And so when it comes to drinking water, the state has several drinking water sampling initiatives. Obviously, the public water systems are sampled as part of their compliance. When PFAS hit the scene, DES was going out and assisting these small public water systems with collecting their PFAS samples and getting them analyzed, really trying to bring down the barriers to make sure we can start identifying what the need is and how big is this contamination problem. That sampling is still ongoing throughout the state. We also have a very robust residential well sampling program, as well as environmental sampling that can be done at hazardous waste sites or potential sites. And we have contract funds that allow us to go out if there is no identified responsible party and start identifying that site, characterizing it, identifying the potential impacts to neighboring properties and water supply wells, And it really just helps, again, take down that barrier of, well, we don't have any money, we can't figure out what the problem is. And making sure we can get out there and respond in a quick manner to identify and start mitigating that issue. And so I work, and Amy does as well, we're both in the MTBE Bureau, MTBE Remediation Bureau, which is in the Waste Division, but we do a lot of work with the Drinking Water Division, or Drinking Water Groundwater Bureau in the Water Division. And, that really big first step is the sampling that MTBE Bureau is doing. And so to date, they've collected almost 15,000 VOC samples throughout the state, 9,500 PFAS samples. And so our Bureau was really stood up when we went to court against the manufacturers of MTBE, and there was a settlement, and that settlement basically created this Bureau. And so initially they went out to characterize groundwater with respect to MTBE, and that's where all those VOC samples came from. But the picture changed dramatically in 2016 when PFAS hit the scene, and we utilized that labor that we had, funding from a different source, to go out and just start collecting PFAS samples. And if you live in Litchfield, you certainly probably had your water sampled, all in the southern New Hampshire area. And so that work is still ongoing and very active. And so the MTBE Bureau has a strategy where they're looking statewide at properties who have received a notification that they are within 500 feet of an AGQS exceedance. So basically, if you live in an area and somebody within 500 feet from your house has a PFAS exceedance, MTBE will send them a letter and go out and sample their well at their schedule. And we have teams of samplers that are constantly in the area, southern New Hampshire a lot. They'll respond in northern New Hampshire as well, to go out and collect those samples at no cost to the homeowner. So then we have investigation. And so those are areas that are requiring investigation, and that might support other bureaus' work. So maybe there's a site that the Haz Waste Remediation Bureau is addressing, and again, there's no responsible party. So they'll send MTBE samplers out to let's just sample the private wells in the area. Let's deal with, what people are consuming first. And we'll be able to rapidly collect those samples and then respond to that need. And then more kind of on target down into the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission's area. Many of you are probably familiar with the consent decree that the state has with Saint-Gobain. And so our sampling teams will target properties that are very close to that consent decree outer boundary. So really, there's a line around the area that Saint-Gobain is responsible for, and they're responsible for sampling in. But what about the people on the other side of that line? We're making sure that we're getting that data collected as well. And then other wells as needed beyond the outer boundary, but still bordering the consent decree. So really paying attention to everything that's going on and where these hotspot areas are, and data gaps, and what we need to help our decision making, especially when it comes to extending water throughout southern New Hampshire. But on the other side, PFAS is the man-made contaminant that we hear about, but there are also a lot of naturally occurring contaminants specifically in private wells. New Hampshire has a lot of arsenic in the bedrock. And so we also create programs, and this was a program funded by the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund that was initiated by DES to really pilot a private well initiative out in the Seacoast. The Seacoast area is known to have large amounts, high levels of arsenic in their private wells. There's a lot of private residential well owners out in the Seacoast. And so we brought forward a program to the commission to really have workshops with the communities in the Seacoast to educate people about their well and the risks of contaminants, naturally occurring contaminants that would be in the well, and to offer them free sampling. And so how can we really outreach to a lot of people at once? And so we have partners in the Seacoast that are going to be standing up these sort of workshops where people can come and educate themselves, get their bottles, get their wells sampled, and then analyzed. And it's all free testing and free guidance. And then the vision of this program is that if you're a low income qualified residential well owner with an issue, arsenic above the standard, you would receive a filter pitcher to address that problem. Again, it's just going to help them with whatever they're drinking, but it's a really important first step to getting that message out there to understand what's in your water. And so that program has almost $300,000 for funding. There's a lot of support in the communities. And we are working on the next steps, which is setting up the website and getting the lab contracts so we can actually start the sampling initiative. But it just highlights that, DES isn't just committed to, PFAS or MTBE, and that we really have to look at everything that's affecting groundwater in the state of New Hampshire and how it affects the residents and the folks that are drinking it. And that it's important to amplify that message that water is more than just the man-made contaminants, and they're, understanding what's in your well. If you're faced with the option to connect to public water, what kind of information should you have at your fingertips to make that decision? And so initiatives like this that amplify our message of just really responsible well ownership are really important. And so the Seacoast one, I think it's a great program, and it's really a pilot that we hope to bring statewide. And so, that's kind of what we're doing on the private well side and the private well sampling. Amy will definitely present to you some maps and, again, a little more on the ground information as far as the PFAS sampling that's happening throughout the state. But then I just kind of wanted to switch gears to drinking water funding, because I showed that droplet of water and all the things that get built into that. And as we talk about what the need is in the state, that funding ability and how we fix some of these issues, and as many as we can, becomes very important. And so as my role of the trust fund administrator, we, through the trust fund and the trust fund commission, certainly support a large amount of projects, a large variety of projects in the state. But there's also other programs at DES, like the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, that I'm sure many of your communities have had applicants, whether it's a small public water system or a municipally owned public water system, come in and receive funding through the SRF. And so just to give you a sense of what the need is in the state of New Hampshire, this number, 1,006,822,691. That is what the DES received in applications in 2021 for both drinking water projects and wastewater and stormwater infrastructure projects. So that is just the communities that sent in an application. And that is an astronomical number. We do not have any funding source with over $1 billion available in either grants or loans to even address those projects that came in. But then I take this number and I start looking at the other programs we have. The need for the private well sampling. We have critical flood risk projects. We have other needs like cybersecurity that public water systems are needing to advance and to improve in their own systems. We have over $40 million that came into the trust fund in the fall. We have $20 million that came into the critical flood risk program. Amy's program has received tens of millions of dollars in PFAS related projects. And so this number quickly becomes obsolete as we start talking about all the other funding needs in the state, and to address really drinking water, but also that long-term viability of our funding sources. And one of the things I like to highlight that's not in that $1 billion number is the need for source water protection. And the Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund has committed to appropriate and budget a portion of the annual funds that they intend to award to projects to source water protection. And it's a very well-run program. This year, there's $2 million in that budget, and that application round is happening right now with eligibility applications due at the end of June. And we also have a workshop to train the stakeholders on those applications. So again, your conservation commissions, nonprofits like Southeast Land Trust, Those are all eligible applicants to come into this program. And what it does is, and I have a quote in the next slide to really highlight the importance of source water protection. And again, just another place where DES and the Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund has the ability to direct some funding that will have a huge impact. And so this was our program by the numbers. 2017, we were just getting off the ground, but over the last couple of years, the trust fund has supported the purchase of the preservation of 6,200 acres of water supply lands. So our contribution, the trust fund's contribution, was about 5.92 million into that. But that's just the eligible piece of that land that's related to the source water or the wellhead protection area or the hydrologic area of concern. But those projects actually amplify up to over 11,000 acres of land preserved for a total project cost of $30 million. And so you can see the impact that $6 million had over the last couple of years, not only in water supply land, but the total land conserved. And that's really important because when you think about contamination and the issues that municipalities and public water systems have to face, I love pulling up this quote from Al Pratt, who's over at the Portsmouth Department of Public Works, where he says, and it is accurate, the cost of protecting land from development far outweighs the cost for upgrading treatment systems and managing degrading surface water quality. Basically, if we don't start at the source and we don't prioritize some protection there in management, managing how a town grows around those supplies, there's going to be a bigger cost on the further end. You want to make sure that you're starting with a good source, that it's well protected. And ideally that helps to manage the costs on the treatment side. And so that's where, again, I applaud the Drinking Water and Groundwater Advisory Commission to continuing to fund the source water protection program that we have. The projects that come in are great projects. They really highlight the need in the state. Entities like Manchester Waterworks, who have committed, picking up parcels around Massabesic. They have a project that was funded by the Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund, or a portion of it came from the trust fund. And it shows their commitment to also preserving that supply because it's such a significant supply in southern New Hampshire. And I saw a chat. Is that a question? Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, we can send the slideshow out afterwards. So really just for the next couple of minutes, I just want to quickly highlight, what I always see is the main key points when we're talking about drinking water and funding. And what the agency is doing. And that first is really focusing on programs that support critical needs. And not necessarily all contamination related, but we have a lot of funding programs. And I can provide a link to our website where there's a table of over 30 drinking water programs. They all have different limitations and applicabilities, but generally they have prioritization within there. Like the Drinking Water SRF, they prioritize the most serious risks to human health. And so PFAS, arsenic, we're talking about lead service lines a lot now. Those are all needs that are being prioritized to ensure that these water systems are in compliance and that they're managing their water and treating appropriately. The Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund, the Advisory Commission has stated that contamination is their #1 priority. And to back that up, they will review a project application addressing contamination anytime. It's what we call the Special Projects Program, but what it does is just, we don't want to wait to an annual round. If you have contamination, then you should come into the trust fund. Other programs like the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, this is wastewater and stormwater, they prioritize that protection of water quality. Again, partners in long-term source preservation and resources. Amy will talk about PFAS. And then we move into the American Rescue Plan Act, which we stood up multiple programs that were focused on disadvantaged systems, flood risk projects, and long-term sustainability. And again, through that program, we do lean on a lot of the prioritizations from the Drinking Water and Clean Water SRS program. And then finally, I know Nate from DOT was talking, or I don't know if he was from DOT. I apologize, Nate. I came in late there, but we have the bipartisan infrastructure law. And in that bipartisan infrastructure law, where the state will be receiving quite a significant amount of federal funds, there's a focus on lead service lines. There's a focus on emerging contaminants. And then there's increased subsidy, which means loan forgiveness for disadvantaged systems addressing emerging contaminants like PFAS. So, you know, even though the agency is really prioritizing the need and to solve some of these problems, it's not just us, it's on the federal level too, where they've recognized that these projects and that need, that $1 billion need, so much of that is related to the need to address contamination. And so again, just how we prioritize contamination in the state of New Hampshire. One of the unique things we brought up to the Drinking Water and Groundwater Advisory Commission was a consolidation study program. And so the commission awarded $200,000 to DES. This is a new program, but we've only had one community come into it so far. And what it does is it offers a $10,000 grant on a first come first served basis to eligible small community water systems. So you can see that eligibility there. Less than 1,000 people in the population. It could be a non-transient, non-community owned by a nonprofit, such as a school that might operate a small community water system. And the source has to exceed a drinking water MCL or a documented water supply shortage. So for example, we had the town of Newfields come in, and basically they have, they're going to be facing an arsenic issue. And so this study gave them some capital funds that is grant that they could invest in an engineer to evaluate the best solution for them. And so we brought this program forward to the commission because of the need to help these systems kind of get through that first hurdle. You know, how does a small water system convince their users, which aren't many people, less than 1,000 people? So, you know, again, that's not 1,000 households. You know, convince them that they should add treatment, or maybe there's another more viable, larger system that they could interconnect to. And so how do they demonstrate without any money that this is a better option, A is better than B? And so that was really the basis of forming this program, is to help these small systems make the best decision for themselves and then their users. And so in the case of Newfields, they completed the study and they identified that interconnecting with Newmarket was a better idea. You know, when it comes to adding treatment, it's not just the cost of the treatment, it's the operator who now has to be trained to manage that treatment. It's the additional sampling required to make sure that the treatment is occurring, you know, and it just kind of escalates from there. Changing out the treatment, you know, all of that goes into consideration when you're doing a study like this versus the long-term cost of connecting and then paying for that water supply. So we think this is a really important exercise for small communities that are faced with these issues, or maybe they have a water supply and they're trying to decide, do we go through the effort to test and protect and manage a new supply well, or do we have another option to get water from somewhere else nearby? And so basically how we do all of this is by leveraging, leveraging funding, because that $1 billion, as I said, it cannot be, we don't have one source, we don't have a check that we can just write out to all the systems needs. And so we at the DES level are trying to leverage as many funding sources as possible. We try to guide communities facing issues of contamination or issues of supply down the best path to help make it the lowest impact to their users, and through grants, through loans, through loan forgiveness, through federal programs, state programs. You know, how do we make it work? Because one funding source can't do it. But when you put them together, it can be quite a bit. And I love thinking about the trust fund, because we've been putting this message from the commission, from the Senate president, who's the chair, is all about leveraged funding. And this really highlights that when you put that idea into practice, it has really tangible results. And so you can see we have awarded about 96 million in grants, 60 million in loans, but then you add 150 million from other funding sources, whether it's state or federal. So we have a total investment of over $300 million. So that's huge. If we can continue to do that, we get closer and closer to that $1 billion need. And I think it just highlights how DES can put this into practice with good results. And when we have a community faced with an issue, I always say that we're their best partners and we will do everything we can to educate them, to show them different sources that they can apply to, and to help them through that process. But then thinking regionally, so in your region, there's a couple of things going on. I'm sure many of you are aware of the different kind of regional initiatives that are occurring. And really, DES is looking at these regional issues and trying to set up for the future. Southern New Hampshire continues to grow, whether it's South Central New Hampshire, Western Southern New Hampshire, East Southern New Hampshire. There's a lot going on, but there's also a need for water. So as we build more housing, as we grow different industries or businesses, water is always going to be a piece of that project or that growth. And so we've taken a couple of steps to really look at that. And I'm not going to talk a lot about the Southern New Hampshire Regional Water Project because I think a lot of you might be familiar with it. But this is the project that that takes Manchester Waterworks water, wheels it through Derry, and then brings it out to Plastow. And the vision of this project initially started to address MTBE impacts in Southern New Hampshire. So Plastow, Salem, and Windham have a significant properties and impacts of MTBE. Plastow specifically, very little source options to grow a public water system, lots of widespread MTBE impacts. Salem lost a couple of their supply wells due to MTBE, and Windham has not a lot of supply. And then they also have a lot of MTBE at the 111-28 interchange. And so we were looking at this project to basically extend public water and that reach of public water systems down through the region. And so it also addresses the supply issues, resolves water supply shortfalls within the Hampstead-Atkinson area, brings in a second supply into Salem to help take off the stress and the strain on their surface water bodies. And then we also reserved a significant capacity from Manchester of their Lake Massabesic and then their new water treatment plant. And so this just gives you an idea of the map of phase 1 and the water needs throughout the southeastern part of New Hampshire. And we have estimates for phase 2 and how we're going to grow this project. But even since the time of developing the basis of design of this project in 2018, 2019 to today, those needs are changing. The PFAS sampling wasn't getting done prior to there. The areas hadn't been identified. Drought hadn't hit as hard as it did in 2020. And so now we're trying to roll all this new information in and say, okay, did what we designed for phase 1 and phase 2, will that hold up when we talk about the future at this point? And we're working with these communities to make sure that we move the next phase of this project appropriately and considering the potential other needs and stresses in the region. And when we talk about regional partners, this isn't DES. It's not typically going to be one community like yourselves. It's going to be a commission or a group representing all different interests within the area and the different communities. And this was just a picture of the water partners, the lawyers involved, DES, the water recipients. Plastow is in this picture. They didn't have a public water system. So there was a lot of work that helped make this project, just the phase 1, happen in the first place. And I think we all met many, many times in this capacity. But these issues aren't easy to solve. And you can see there is a lot of partners and discussions and negotiations that go into solving regional water issues. And so DES, we didn't learn our lesson and we want to keep doing it because we see the value in bringing regional stakeholders together. And I was looking at the map in Sylvia's signature of the regional planning of your planning commission and the reach. And I believe a lot of your communities have probably become involved in this long-term planning study or have at least had some outreach from DES. And so what we have going on right now, which is funded through a contract funded in our operating budget from the trust fund, is a South Central New Hampshire regional long-term planning project. And basically we're looking at, Litchfield, Merrimack, Londonderry, Hooksett, Bedford, Wyndham, all of these communities that are growing, that are facing contamination issues, and eventually visioning, okay, public water. So we've got a huge need. There is hundreds of thousands of people in this area. Resources aren't, there's no infinite supply. What are we going to do? How are we going to manage drawing water, moving water throughout the region? What do people need today? What's the identified need? What about those communities that don't have public water yet, like Raymond? Do they have a vision of public water? We're looking at now huge future planning in Southern New Hampshire. And so we've started going through some stakeholder surveys. And the goal is really to inform decision-making. And how do we look at the long-term water supply needs in the study area? Again, we know a lot about PFAS. Amy will show you a great map, but what's next? And so we have to be thinking bigger and we have to be thinking regionally because it all comes down and it will all affect each other. And so the purpose of this study is really to prepare a comprehensive high-level water supply plan for Southern New Hampshire. And like I said, the first step is really stakeholder surveys. And so those surveys are underway. And I think they're currently reaching out to public water systems, but then they're going to be reaching out to communities without a public water system. And so you can see on this map where this extends. You have Milford in here, Amherst, Goffstown, Bedford, Merrimack, this whole region and what the needs are. And there's a lot of public water already in here, but we know this is growing. And so we have to take that into consideration. And I have Londonderry kind of called out in the middle because, this is a project that's in progress and that's trying to determine their need and how to bring them water for a significant amount of private residential wells that are impacted with PFAS. And that is a project that we have going on as well within the town and working with the town leadership on what their vision is and how do we solve this issue with them. So they're included in the study as well, but they're sort of a study within the study just because of the significant need there. And so with that, I think I'll turn it over to Amy. I hope I left her. Amy, did I leave you enough time?
Well, like you said, Erin, in the beginning, we could talk about this all day. Like this topic is just expansive. So Sylvia, I don't know if you want to take time for questions and to finish up your meeting. I am more than willing to come back to another meeting to deep dive into PFAS because there's a lot there with St. Gobain and so that we don't really just gloss over that issue. And I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of questions around the PFAS issue as well. So if that is something you would like to do, rather than me trying to squeeze it all into like 9 minutes right now, I'm willing to do that.
I think that makes sense, right? Yeah, Bill.
Throw it in. I know there's on the PFAS situation, there was I'm not sure the right word for it, but another program that was going to deal with a number of issues in Bedford within the consent decree that was not addressed by the program that came out. And the last meeting from DES a couple of weeks ago basically said that was would not be addressed until legal review have been made, and I think anything premature to that would be just, it wouldn't be a good use of everybody's time, because this is a major question.
Yeah, so that's correct. And that information.
Delay it, I think would be very useful.
Okay, yeah, because that information that you're discussing still has not been made public, but I do believe by like a month from now that it will be, and that I would be able to talk about it at that time.
You know, Amy, you make a lot of sense, and Aaron, thank you so much. This has been excellent, and I think, yeah, if we have any immediate questions, but let's take Amy at our June meeting, which is the fourth Tuesday of the month. Same time, same bat channel. And I think that that would be most excellent. That way we don't rush Amy, and this is basically becoming a two-part series. So why don't we, does that make sense, Mark?
Yeah, I agree.
All
I was
right.
looking at my time and then I didn't realize how far after noon we started. And I was like, oh, okay, wait, I thought it was okay, Amy.
Right. So does anyone have an immediate question for all that Aaron covered? And yes, Martin.
Well, I haven't heard anything about the wells that were contaminated east of the decree line. I got letters from DES that my neighbors' wells were contaminated with PFAS. I had my well tested at that point in time. It was okay. But the only solution I've seen so far is that the town wants to create some kind of water issue, but gonna make the taxpayers pay. And I find that very odd, since St. Gobain did not make us whole. They should be responsible and pay for it. And is there any program that's gonna help the homeowners on the east side of the decree line to fix the PFAS contamination without having to, what I look at is punish taxpayers of Londonderry to pay for it?
Right, yeah, so yeah, okay, so you're in Londonderry. That is what we're working on right now, is to develop a solution within Londonderry. And I'll let Amy chime in if she has anything to offer as far as private wells. So there's been a couple of iterations. There was a rebate program that Londonderry brought forward, but then DES is actually taking on a statewide rebate program. Within the town, we are working on this feasibility study to extend water. The town as well, if you live there, you might have voted in favor of a study to evaluate purchasing and standing up a public water system in Londonderry. And basically that consent decree line that runs down High Range Road is the legal boundary. So that's the outer boundary of St. Gobain. So while it's really unfortunate that, you know, you might live on the west side and have bottled water being delivered, but on the east side, you don't have that responsible party kind of on the hook providing water. But what we are working with is ideally to get to a place where there is some cost share from the St. Gobain side to bring in public water into Londonderry. And that's why I kind of hashed that out, because there's a lot in Londonderry. The state stepped in maybe a year and a half ago now, and we developed a plan to work with Londonderry and to initiate this feasibility study and to really help bring water and kind of solve these problems. But I'll let Amy kind of jump in and, see what she can say about, the other more private well initiative.
Yeah, so like Aaron was saying, you're probably aware that Londonderry at one point was going to stand up a rebate program for $500 per resident to put on treatment, whether it be point of use or point of entry treatment. Then the state decided to stand up their own rebate program, which is still not accepting applications. We're still in the process of setting that up and getting everything settled. I am hoping that will be up and ready like late summer, early fall. And at this point, that program has gone through a couple iterations all in itself. And right at this point, it will be offering $5,000 per household for point of use or point of entry treatment, but has also gone a step farther and is going to offer $10,000 per household that interconnects into a larger water system. So a service connection. And I can provide more details in June as to how the program's going to work as we get closer to making that live and accepting applications. But that will be for private well users outside the consent decree area.
All right, that sounds great. Any other? Let's go back to gallery. Any other questions from the commissioners? We have one in the back, James.
I was just gonna ask if Aaron knows if any other source water has been identified outside of the Manchester Waterworks district. Just curious because that is a really valuable natural asset for the region, pretty much Manchester, and something that's been built up over decades to create basically reliable drinking water for the city of Manchester. And I've noticed some pretty significant changes in that body of water since A, the drought, and B, the new connections. That water level now varies by the feet instead of inches. And so I wonder if there might be new vulnerabilities to that water source for the generations that have put it together over the decades.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So Manchester is developing up their Merrimack River water supply. And so this is a huge project for them. So they have been collecting what they call the Merrimack Source Development Charge for what seems like decades now. And that has allowed them to build, it's a radial well collector that's basically under the river. So there's natural filtration through the sand in the river. And then they'll pull that up, and then they have a treatment plant that they're currently constructing. The radial well is in, the treatment plant is under construction, and this is over in Hooksett. And so I believe their additional capacity is about 8 million gallons a day from that radial well. And that's intended to allow them to have additional capacity, but also to try to alleviate some of that demand off of the Massabesic Lake. So they've recognized a long time ago that they are going to need to diversify a source, and they've been investing in this MSDC since then. So new users, Pennachuck Waterworks, Manchester, the Southern New Hampshire project, all have paid into that MSDC development charge. But when you look now, then expand regionally at that regional map that I showed, our two partners are really Manchester Waterworks and Pennachuck are the really big regional users. They both draw off the Merrimack. Pennachuck has some additional sources. And so looking at that regional need is going to be really important to figure out, where does the water come from? We've got Manchester that's pulling out of the Merrimack, and Massabesic, Pennachuck pulling out of the Merrimack. Can we beef up their withdrawal area? What do they need to transmit more water? And so it's really trying to figure out what we can do with the resources that we have. So that was a great question.
When's that Merrimack well coming online?
I believe it's 2023.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I see we've hit our bewitching. Oh, Ray has a question. 1 second.
I think in the past we talked about teaming up with Pennachuck down in Nashville, having a hookup there for that one region to tap into the other regions if they ever need to. They were working on that in a big way at one time. They had a couple meetings down in Nashville. I don't know if they've done that. I haven't heard it.
It's an emergency.
Aaron, did you hear the question?
No. And what communities are you talking about?
Nashua and Manchester having a hookup together for an emergency transfer if they ever needed it.
A mutual support.
Oh, yeah, like municipal aid. I don't know the intricacies of their systems that well. So with a direct connection between Merrimack and Pennachuck, is that what you're saying?
Right.
Yeah, again, looking at regionally, I just don't know on the ground if where they would have that. Obviously Pennachuck uses Manchester to serve Londonderry. If we build out Londonderry, there might be a connection to Pennachuck down on the southern side. So I don't really know the best answer to that question, just because I'm not on the ground with Pennachuck's system. But, you know, I think from the agency standpoint and drinking water, you know, looking at those emergency interconnections is really important. I know the trust fund has funded several between Dover and Somersworth. We have a study going on in the Seacoast, or a design that we're supporting, which would interconnect Dover and Portsmouth over the new the bike ped bridge next to the General Sullivan Bridge over the Piscataqua, and basically creating that emergency interconnection, you know, should somebody's water system go down. And so we do prioritize those. Again, as communities might face different issues, it's really important that they can provide water. So, but I don't know if Pennachuck and Manchester are currently directly connected.
Well, Aaron, thank you very much for your presentation, and Amy, thank you for your willingness to postpone and join us again next month. We will move on with the rest of our agenda very quickly. Next item on our agenda is the Personnel and Budget Committees. We're looking for volunteers. Sylvia.
Yeah, that's real quick. We can talk about it next time as well, but if everyone can sort of review their schedule and their time allowance to the commission. We know that Bill Herman, he was on every single committee, so now we have this fairly sizable gap. So we'd love to have volunteers for the Personnel Committee and the Budget Committee. I think those are the two that come to mind. We haven't had to meet for the Building Committee in a while. Yeah, so it's not a big commitment. It's just sort of on occasion, maybe once or twice a year. And so we are looking for volunteers, and please reach out to Linda if you have that time available and expertise, or just willingness to help out.
All right, thank you. Moving on to other business. James, this is your official point. I'll give you 90 seconds to reiterate what you spoke about earlier.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I jumped the gun. I was so excited. Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission was the recipient of a $500,000 grant from the Environmental Protection Agency to conduct clean assessments of brownfield sites within the region. The narrative we wrote focused on areas of concentration of low-income and minority populations. And so there's one census tract in Derry and several in Manchester. We identified 2 high priority sites in Manchester and 1 in Derry. That being said, anywhere within the municipalities of Derry or Manchester that might have a brownfields are open game for assessment. So we'll be putting together an advisory group in the coming weeks. And that advisory group will be overseeing the hiring of a qualified engineering professional who will then take us collectively through the process of these assessments.
All right, thank you. Any other business to attend?
Linda? No,
No,
we're good.
Public comment? Anyone have anything pressing that they have to get off their chest? Yes, sir.
For all the regions in the Southern two, I'm also the co-chair and founder for Queen City Pride. It is a huge representation of the Queer Alliance community in Southern New Hampshire. We're one of the largest prides in Southern New Hampshire and a resource for other prides throughout. So if you check our site out on Facebook, please share, let people know it's a free event. We continue to make it free so that it is a representation and also a way for people to learn and be a resource for all of our communities.
Great. Thank you. Any other commissioner thoughts? If hearing none, move to adjourn. Any second? All in favor? Thumbs up.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time, as always.